Hi, welcome back to the Indosoft Web Studio video training series. In this series, or in this video, we're going to cover part one of two for drivers and communications with drivers. What I have here is a pasted picture out of one of our tech notes showing the tags database and through the driver how we get information from the PLC or other device, and it comes into the tags database from the outside world. And remember, the tags are all internal. It's just where do they get their information from? Do they get them through the driver? Do they get them from a database? Do they get them from an OPC server? Where do they get their information from? But they're all internal regardless. So I'm just using this as an example to talk about how the information gets in. And this is really kind of one arm zoomed in view of a graphic that I showed you in an earlier video. If we go into about this application, how the software works, internal structure, data flow, and there will be an updated version of this, but for the driver runtime arm here, we have the tags database through the driver runtime, and that whole thing is kind of zoomed in right here. So here's the tags database through the driver and how this works. Now, if you had other drivers, they would be tied in through this point, multiple drivers simultaneously. So I'm going to collapse this, and then I'm going to open up my Project Explorer, unpin this, so I get this screen going here. Now, when we insert a driver into the product, we have a couple of different ways to do it. We can go here under the Communications tab or the COM tab and right-click and insert driver, add, remove driver. A different place to do that is under Insert. We can go here to Add, Remove Driver. It's essentially the same thing. You can do it in either place, whichever is more convenient for you to do. I'm going to go here, right-click, and Add, Remove Drivers. Now here I get to choose from the list of drivers that we have built into Indosoft Web Studio. And these are all the ones that are included in the product at no additional charge. So I'm going to scroll through here. You can see we have some for building automation. We have some for all the different brands of PLCs that you can imagine. Now, for this particular example, I'm going to use a Modbus Ethernet. So I'm going to click on this list here and then hit the letter M on my keyboard, and it will jump me down to the letter M's. And I know that the particular driver that I want is this MOTCP, or Modbus via TCP. While I am selected on an individual driver line here, I can hit Help, and that will open up the PDF manual for that particular driver. Once I have this line selected, this is all the available drivers. I can hit Select here, and it will place it into my project. Now, depending on the license level that you have, if your license supports multiple drivers, then you could select and add multiple drivers in here. In this case, I happen to have a Modbus Ethernet. I could have one from Rockwell. I could have one from Siemens, and support multiple connections simultaneously there. So for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to click on OK. And now that driver has been added into my project. And if I right-click on the driver name itself, I can go to Settings. Now let's briefly talk about some of the settings here. If you have a serial driver, this one happens to be Ethernet, but if you have a serial driver, you can use what's called encapsulation. So for example, if I was using a serial driver over a radio modem or some other TCP/IP connection, I could use this setting, and it would allow me to go through that connection as if it was just a really long cable. Also here, under some of the advanced, we have some timeouts. And as an example, this timeout is the amount of milliseconds that it will take to report an error, and that used in conjunction with some of the other fields for retries and things of that nature. Some different setups in the advanced settings that we have here. I'm just going to leave all of these alone and click on Cancel, get myself back out of this. And what I'm going to do is the main driver sheet is automatically inserted for us. And you don't have to use the main driver sheet, but it's a little bit more convenient option than what we call the standard driver sheets, which I'll show in a minute. I'm going to double click on the main driver sheet, and here you can see how we can set this up. I can put in a tag name here and then have an IP address to a particular PLC and then an I/O address within that particular PLC. I have a PLC connected, a Modbus PLC connected to my laptop, and it happens to be at this IP address, And if you were to take a look at the manual, let me paste that in here. If we were to look at this in a manual, you would see that not only do we need the IP address, but we also need the port number for that particular PLC. So I'm going to put a colon, then 502, which most Modbus PLCs default to, and then the station ID number, the node number of that particular PLC. I'm going to put a colon and then a number 1, and that's the address that that particular PLC is at. So let's say I wanted to connect the tag name called temperature, and that tag does not exist in this particular project. I started a new project before I started this video. I'll say yes, and I'll keep that as an integer value. And then I need to know the I/O address in that particular PLC. So for this PLC, I'm going to communicate with address 40,001. If you take a look in our documentation, you'll find that to address that memory type and offset, it's going to be 4x:1. And I'm going to have that set up to both read and write, and it's going to scan always. Other choices are whether or not it's automatically scanned, or is it only happening when it's on a given screen. And there's some other things we'll talk about in the second video for scaling opportunities out here too. We're going to come back and cover these status fields. Notice this header. We have these 4 status fields as well as a disable field. In the disable field, you could put a constant, such as a number 1, and that would disable this worksheet altogether. Or you can put a tag name in here and turn this worksheet on and off as needed. Also, I think we'll cover this a little bit more in the video 2 for the drivers, but this station could be a string tag, and you could change the IP address of the particular driver as you're on the fly during runtime. So I have one tag name tied to one PLC at this IP address, one I/O point or one memory address within that. And I don't need these statuses, but I do highly recommend that you use those, and again, we'll come back and get that. I'm going to close and save this main driver sheet. And here on this screen, I'm going to insert a piece of text, and we'll call this temperature, and a colon, and some pound signs. And now I will apply a text data link animation to it. And here I will choose the tag called temperature. Once I've done that, I can save this, make sure that that screen is my startup screen, and go ahead and run this, and this should communicate with the PLC. That's a PLC that's connected to my particular laptop here, and those are the values that are in the PLC. Now those values are changing every few seconds in the PLC. This is not the particular scan rate of the driver. That happens a little bit faster than that. This is how fast the value is changing within the PLC itself. So bring this back up here, and big screen here. Let's save this and close. The other thing that I want to do is go into the main driver sheet, and let's talk a little bit about some of the fields that are there. Go into the main driver sheet, and these read complete and write complete, whatever tag we have in here will toggle every time there's a read or a write completed. Those should be Boolean tags, and the status fields are going to be integer type tags, and those will give us error codes back if there's any problems reading or writing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a read complete tag, which I'm going to just abbreviate RDCP, and that doesn't exist, and I'm going to make that a Boolean. Say OK. And under the write complete WRCP, that also doesn't exist. I'm going to make that a Boolean as well. And, oops, excuse me, read status RDST. That one will be an integer, so that one's OK. And write status WRST, and that will also be an integer. So we have read complete, write complete, read status, and write status. And I will go ahead and place these values on the screen. So I'm just going to copy that and go back to my main screen here. And here on the screen, I'm going to put some text. And eventually we'll need some pound signs in there, but for now, what we'll do is we'll come in here and put the caption in there, read complete, colon, and since that's only going to be a bit, I don't need that many pound signs. And now what I'll do is copy this down. I configure the tag, so that's the caption. I did not configure the tag, so this needs to be read complete. So I will choose read complete here from the list. And now that I have this one copied down here, I can change that to WR in the caption, and then change what tags it's pointing to WRCP. So those are the complete, and those will toggle every time there's a read or a write. And I'm just going to copy this over, and this will be status ST will be the expression. I probably should go grab that from the browse button so I don't accidentally mistype it. And similar here. And now for these statuses, there's a chance that they can be some fairly large numbers. I'm just going to make sure that there's 5 pound signs there. That'll give me a number up to 65,535, so that should be enough. And I will copy this down and change this to WR for read status, and change the tag. And again, I should go to the browser here. I'll go to the write status, I should say. Write status, and that should be everything that I need. So now, one more thing. What I will do is I'll place a button on the screen to reset the tag temperature back to 0, so I can force some kind of write to happen. We'll call this reset, and we'll put a command animation on here and change this to reset tag. That will set that tag back to 0, and we'll do that for temperature. Okay, so now I have read status, write status, read complete, and write complete. We can see how those work. And I will close the main screen, close the driver worksheet, and now when I run, I can see that I'm reading the value, and my read status is not showing anything. So let's actually go back here to the runtime. Let's stop, make sure everything is all saved and connected up. Now rerun it. And now as I'm reading, we can see the read complete is toggling roughly every 600 milliseconds. The main driver sheet scans at a rate that's approximately 600 milliseconds. You can change that in the setup or in the configuration that is detailed in the manual, but we recommend that you leave this at the default of 600 milliseconds. And you can see the read status is currently 0. That means that we have good communications. And there's no write complete because we're only reading using this. Now if I use this to force a write, or force a write to 0 of that tag, when I press that once, it reset that back to 0. You can see that the write complete toggled from 0 to 1. If I make that happen again, it will toggle back to 0, and it will stay in that state until something else causes a write in that driver worksheet. The read status and the write status are currently 0s. That means that I have good communication. And if I go and I go offline here and I take my PLC offline, we're going to get bad quality question marks here, which I'll show you in the next video. And then you can see that my read status is 16. That means that I can't connect. I should probably try pinging that particular PLC, or look for some other troubleshooting tips in the next video. So what I'm going to do here is go back to my driver, and instead of the main driver sheet, which you can mix and match any different types of I/O addresses and different PLCs in here, I'm going to insert insert a standard driver sheet. Now back to the main driver sheet, you can notice that we have these different 4 status fields. In the standard driver sheet, I have these same 4 status fields, which we should populate, and quite often people will do this with an array tag, so very similar to how I've set this up with the read status and write status. They might do every individual driver worksheet. It would be an array element number of. But we also have the ability to read trigger and write trigger this worksheet whenever we want to. So a little bit different than the main driver sheet, which is triggered at the 600 milliseconds. It's actually triggered off of the tag called blink slow. Back here on the main driver sheet, you get to put in a trigger and trigger this worksheet whenever you want it to read only, or write only, or both. And optionally, you can put in a value in here, a tag or a constant that could enable this to read when idle. It will read whenever it can, as fast as it can. So I could put a constant 1 in there and tell it just to read whenever it can. And if I put a 1 in here, I can tell that to, when any tag changes, go ahead and cause the write to happen. I could also put tags in any of these 4 fields and cause those to happen whenever I wanted them to. What's pretty common here under read trigger and write trigger, let's say, is to maybe have tags toggling from the scheduler worksheet, which will be covered in another video. That would allow you to set up the scan rate that you wanted to happen. And it's not uncommon for people to want faster triggers than 600 milliseconds in the main driver sheet, but it's also not uncommon for people to want triggers that are longer, maybe let's say several minutes or several hours, so they don't tie up communications, or maybe even once a day. Take for example some kind of remote pumping station that might be powered by a solar panel and a battery. You might want this to burst communications only at 2 a.m. in the morning. Make sure you got all the communications and then shut down until 2 a.m. the next day. That way you don't tie up communications or bring down the battery, or if it's maybe some kind of leased line or a cellular connection or a satellite connection, you can get reduced rates for reduced traffic as well. With the standard driver sheet, unlike the main driver sheet where you can mix and match the different data types, I/O addresses, integer addresses, data words from the PLC, you can put in here, you put the header and the station IP address. So for example, again, I'll go grab this off screen, the IP address for that particular PLC. Oh, that's the tag name, sorry. Here, I'll paste that in, and I need the colon 502 for the Modbus and 1 for the Modbus Ethernet. And here you can see the header has already tried to fill itself out. This would be the output type. I could have inputs, coils, holding registers. In this case, I'm going to do 4x colon 0 or colon 1, and the tag name in here, maybe I'll put pressure down here, and that doesn't exist. And in here, the address would be, let's say, 1. Now, in combination with this header, this is going to be an offset into this address. So this would be 40,001. That would be the same address. So maybe for this one I want 40,002, and it would be an offset of 2 into that address there. Realistically, this is the way that the Modbus protocol works anyway. It's a memory type 4 and then an offset into that. And that way they've been able to have 4, 5, 6-digit addressing. It's, for example, 4001 is the same as 40,001 is the same as 400,001. It's the 4 and then offset 1 into that, irrelevant of how large the number is for the different PLCs, the different memory sizes that they have within them. Also note that you can put a string type tag in here for the station, as well as you can do that here, and be flexible. And let's see. I think I've covered everything that I want to cover for driver video number 1. That should be the basics, and we'll cover more in driver video number 2. Thanks. Have a great day.